I'm always fascinated when I come here because you're so enthusiastic. And in a sense, it would be great in our country if people were as interested in our culture, in our heritage, in our roots, as you were part of the global diaspora. Because it's about who you are and what about I am, who am I. It's about defining yourselves. It's about the threads that link the past with the present to the future. It is all about identity. And identity politics in Scotland are becoming more significant over the last few years. And I'm confident we're redefining ourselves. As you are in America, we're redefining ourselves in Scotland in the role that we have. That, I think, is the power of the relationship. And when you have that strength and that bond between yourselves as a diaspora and ourselves back at home, we can take on the world. We can do wonderful things. And I'm sick and tired of a world in which it's always bad news. It's always austerity. You know, we need inspiration. We need idealism, especially for young people who must look around at times and think, what a weary set of people we have. Because the world can get better, and it seems to me that one of the things that motivates me, my glass is always half full, is this idea that there is a better way ahead. And quite frankly, tonight, with your involvement, your links with Scotland, we can be very much part of that. But some of that later. What about the Scottish situation politically? How many English people are here before I offend you this evening? No hands going. No hands going. No hands. Well, that's 2 hands going up to one person, so that's only 50%, so that's fine. We're emerging a referendum in the autumn of 2014. You probably heard a great deal about it. Let me try and be slightly factual this evening about where we are. 1707 was the Union. The Welsh joined the Union of England in the 16th century. We joined the Union in the 18th century, and Ireland joined the Union in the 19th century. So the first important point was that there is no nation-state which is not an amalgam of countries. So we are actually nations as part of this Union. For 305 years, this Union has served us well. But today we've reached a point where a lot of people feel that the Union is not serving the purposes it was intended to. And there's a feeling in Scotland, not necessarily independence, that we need to continue our journey in terms of our evolution as a nation. That said, Alex Salmon will put legislation to the Scottish Parliament next year, 2013, for a referendum to be held in the autumn of 2014. There are 2 options just now. One is to remain within the Union, no change, status quo. I don't see much purpose in that. The other alternative is independence. Independence means what it says. It's what you buy. It's a separate nation. It's the UN. It's the EU. It's the new relationship with Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And funnily enough, I don't think that's the option to be preferred either. And what we are seeking in Scotland is some alternative, and this may divide public opinion this evening, some alternative that keeps Scotland within the Union, that linked to a radical set of proposals to give us far more powers, far more fiscal autonomy, and actually to drive forward the nation to deal with the problems that I think the Union, in the 305 years of its existence, has not had. So in that sense, it's all about sentiment, it's all about heart. But there's a hard-headedness about the debate, because we don't want to pretend that Scotland will be flowing with milk and honey because we put a cross on a ballot paper that says independence or status quo unionism. My belief is that we should look clearly at an alternative which tackles Scottish problems, continues to take the best of Scotland and promote it internationally, and equally important, something that satisfies both the heart and the mind. I look at America and I see US politics. Sometimes people don't vote their interests, some people vote their identity. Since 2005, when the SNP took over, identity politics have become much firmer in the minds of all the political parties. People are now voting their sentiment, now voting their Scottishness. And I say, what's wrong with that? Why not take pride, passion, patriotism and wrap it in the saltire? I believe I can do that, and I do that every day, but I can still be a good part of the Union. So I think this inherent contradiction that if you're a proud Scot, you can't be a proud member of the Union is wrong. But you know the good thing about a referendum? The people will decide. But let me just throw in one cautious note. The reason why we're having a referendum, the reason why there's such a division between Westminster and Edinburgh, is because, quite frankly, since 1999, the Union, Westminster, and of course the English administration at Westminster, have shown no interest in the subject. Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland have made tremendous progress. There's no sense of sharing that at Westminster, no sense of entering the spirit of that. So what we've got then is potentially a conflict between those that want reform and want the journey to continue, and a Westminster highly centralised, obsessed with sovereignty, will devolve power but not share power. And I finish on this rather cautious note in this part to say that the seeds of the end of the Union, or possible independence, will not be from Edinburgh, but it could well be from London, if there is not an appreciation of the distance we travel and where we intend to go. Now, there are lots of other asides I could make with one English colleague here that gives me a valuable audience to aim at. But on the other hand, you know, there has been a lot of shared history with the Union and shared sacrifice. But you know, ladies and gentlemen, we live in a different world now, because the world of Scotland, the world of the UK, young people who don't know about war, they don't know about the Second World War. There's been no shared sacrifice on their part. So I think it's important when we look back and say we've got a shared history, that young people will say, well, what about a shared future? So the challenge to independence, the challenge to the Union is, what vision do you have? What problems can you tackle that we're not tackling? What kind of Britain do we want to see in Europe? Britain internationally? I'm at the point where I think intellectually and politically, of course Scotland can be independent tomorrow. It's a proud nation, and economically, I think it could do a job. But the decision for Scots will be, do you want the trauma of separation from the Union and the long transition period it will involve? Or do you want to stay within the Union and actually do some of the things that I've said without the upheaval of change? And can I just say an important point about Northern Ireland? This is a very troubled part of the Union over the last 30 or 40 years. But let me say here tonight, the progress made in Northern Ireland is simply fantastic. I don't use the word often, fabulous and fantastic, you know, for the X Factor and some of the rubbish television programs. But tonight, fantastic is just an achievement. And when you get, you know, the deputy head of Sinn Féin and the Queen, if you get Ian Paisley sitting on the same couch as McGuinness, you have to recognise this pure symbolism of people who have hated each other unto death, and kneecapping, and skirmishes that embarrassed the Union. That's yesterday, and tomorrow they're marching on. And to be fair to the Welsh, there are no Welsh people here, and I won't want to abuse the Welsh anyway, they are now warming to devolution, they want more powers, they want to make real progress. So I think the positive thing for yourselves this evening, you'll all have a view about where Scotland might want to be. The encouraging thing is that the journey continues, and we'll be in a good place, regardless of the outcome, in 2014. We value what other people think. It'd be no bad thing for you to take an interest, as you are doing, in what we're doing, and basically see Scotland move on. And I think that when we leave that part and look at the question of this patriotism and the humanity issue, I do a lot of Burns speaking, and I think Burns is a global icon. He was literally 250 years ahead of his time, and apart from his music, apart from the fact he saved Scottish songs, apart from his poetry, apart from his narrative poems, he was a brilliant philosopher. But I'm going to go on to him in a minute, but I thought in terms of Scotland, you know, our politics are bedeviled in the UK and the US by politicians, political processes that often bear no relationship to the public. And I just want to remind you of a brilliant quote by Martin Luther King. And he's talking about making decisions that affect people. And he said, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And I'd like to think that the revolution in politics that has to take place is we get back to a point where there is a synergy between the elected and those that elect them. And in the UK, the Martin Luther King comment continues by saying, and there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe or politic nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. And I just believe in terms of the constitutional question, Scots will want to take the right decision. And I hear critics and commentators say, well, it'll be this and nothing else, or it'll be the mind and nothing else. You know, the Scots, mature people, given the great challenge, I think will rise to it. And I think we should remember the Martin Luther King comment, which I think is very, very appropriate. But for me then, what is this humanity that we talk about around the table? What is this link with Scotland? Why do we value Scotland? Why are we both Scottish? Why are you American as well? I just want to trip through what I believe is my Scottishness and what is worth promoting, worth projecting worldwide. We do believe in liberty, humanity, freedom, pride, passion, justice, fairness. We're very international in our orientation. We believe in friendship, brotherhood, and the universal themes. And if there's one issue, and it's no disrespect to the ladies, but in the Burns time, quote from him, it's the timeless assertion of the dignity of man. Don't we search for a world where the dignity of someone could be valued, where human rights are valued, where the individual is valued. You know, America makes a great play of that and does a good job, but the rest of the world, out with Europe, often has trouble in sharing these ideals. But that idea of the dignity of everyone, linked to the broader humanity that we preach, is surely a big Scottish trait. I hope you will agree with that. And I think it's something that drives this continuing relationship forward, often in difficult situations. So I think in a way that's why we're here tonight. You know, it's not some kind of ghost of the past that we're searching for. It is actually tangible. We enjoy the kinship, we enjoy the friendship, and you're proud to think that way back, maybe centuries ago, someone was born in Scotland that led you to be here this evening. What an amazing thing that is. And I think that it's worth supporting, worth developing. But if I could just make a point about this patriotism of humanity. It was Victor Hugo in France who was really fed up by thinking, you know, the French, and God, I'm not talking about the French tonight, or the Loews almost. But I think the Economist described the French as quirky. That seems pleasant enough to leave it at that particular point. But in a sense, Victor Hugo was trying to say, well, look, everybody's, you know, concerned about their patriotism within the US or within the UK or within France. He says, I'm bigger than that. I want to be bigger than that. And he coined the phrase, you want to be a patriot of humanity. And there are quotes from FDR in this country to Charlotte Bronte in England, which actually share that particular concept. So I'd like you this evening to contemplate that what drives us forward is not just US or Scotland, but it's our internationalism, and to be able to say with some concern and some real seriousness, we are patriots of humanity. And that leads me on to the point that in a troubled world, in a fractured world, in a world of great uncertainty, these are actually values that we can cherish, we can travel, they can travel with us, and I think effectively put into place in other countries would make the world a much, much better place to live in. So that naturally takes me on to the power of the pen and the power of the president. I viewed with some disbelief early comments that Abraham Lincoln, your most special president, was actually linked to Burns in a very, very significant way. They never met, but of course in 2009 there was different celebrations of Lincoln and indeed Robert Burns. So let me just take you through some of the issues, and a lot of them affect Washington, because clearly after his early days as a lawyer, he was on Capitol Hill, and then in a sense he was in Washington. But the interesting part of the story is, and I come to a point about upper class women, so I don't want anyone to be offended, if anybody qualifies for that description this evening. Between Lincoln and Burns, both were farmers, both lived in poverty, both tried surveying, both battled depression, both had problems dealing with upper class women. We better not go any further into that one. They both believed in the supernatural, they had a passion for people and the dignity of man. They battled oppression and injustice, and both were cut down before their time. And if you look at the Gettysburg Address, I think 254 words of immaculate prose and a huge message to society. And if you look at some of Burns' work, I'm making a big bold leap here, there are phrases in there that you could read in many of Burns' works. And I then thought that was a bit of, you know, ridiculous suggestion that a president. But then you find, before he went to Congress, as a lawyer, he carried a copy of Burns' poems with him everywhere. As a family, they recited I can't do it now. It's a 20-minute long. You could recite Tam O'Shanter. If people don't know what Tam O'Shanter is, it's a very lengthy narrative, unbelievably complex, about witches and ghouls in a church in Alloway, with lightning flashing. But anyway, he was able, with the family, to recite all of that. And when he was in court, he always had a copy of Burns, his poems, with them. And it was his inseparable companion, as it says in the literature. And his biographers also noted that when he was in Washington, he was asked on many occasions to contribute to societies, especially Burns societies. He rarely did. There's one suggested visit that there's no documentation. But what he was able to do was he was able to often send messages to those societies praising the work of Robert Burns. And in that sense, after he died, members of his family went to Ayrshire to visit the relatives of Robert Burns. And again, that is well documented. So I'd like to think that it's just a bit of this continuing development of our shared experience, our shared history. We're finding these nuggets everywhere. I'm proud of the fact that your greatest president, in my judgment, maybe not yours, and our greatest iconic national figurehead were actually linked by the words that he wrote. And I'd like to think, in terms of the address, Gettysburg Address and others, that he was able to put some of that into practice. And indeed, the last readings he made were 3 days before he was assassinated in Washington. So all in all, ladies and gentlemen, that's actually a brilliant story. And let me just read 2 lines from the Gettysburg Address, just to give you the flavour of Burns. 70 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Let me finish this evening by giving you a piece of Robert Burns' poem, and it's there for honest poverty, or a man's a man for all that. Then let us pray as come it may, as come it will for all that sense and worth for all the earth shall bear the grief for all that. For all that and all that, it's coming yet for all that man, the world o'er, shall brothers be for all that. And it's the brothers be for all that. Again, apologising to the ladies, but in this 18th century, it was all about men. But what a stirring notion that someday the world will be brothers all over the world. And if you look at the Gettysburg Address, look at some of the further work that's been done, I think that that is a telling tale for us this evening, and a telling tale for us to build on. Often we're classified in politics as this and that. Republicans, Democrats, Labour, Liberal, Democrats, Conservatives. I think it's time we go back to a lot of first principles in politics, about fairness, about justice, about virtue, about a whole range of issues. And it seems to me, ladies and gentlemen, that these are the issues that keeps our relationship strong. I've been very proud and privileged to say a few words to you this evening. I hope some of what I've said has been at least mildly entertaining, some hopefully a bit inspiring, but more importantly, your nation is in good hands, and I'm confident that we'll march forward, and with the support of yourselves in the future, we'll build that world of community that brothers will be throughout the world. Thanks very much. Lovely to see you.